Okay, on today's workbench, we are working on a 1968 Fender Pro Reverb. This is a black line silver face, so you can see that a bit better. You can see the black lines here, 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 and here. I talk a little bit more about the history of that in the Vibrolux reverb restoration series I did. And this amp was purchased by me specifically for a part to install in the Vibrolux. So I will put a link in the description to that video in question, as well as maybe up in the corner of your screen. But now that the Vibrolux is all done, rocking, and sounds fantastic, I now have a chance to turn my attention towards this amp and get this a bit more dialed in for its next owner. So as you can see, it is quite a lot of original stuff in here. There's also some parts changed. We've got obviously some cap changes here, bias cap change here, a few other things, some resistors here that are sticking out to me immediately. So really the plan is just to kind of look through everything, see if there's anything visually that's off, check some voltages, check some different values of the resistors and whatnot to make sure everything is good to go. And then, yeah, we'll just kind of go from there. I have played this amp before, just briefly, and I don't recall anything really sticking out as being wrong with it other than maybe a little bit noisy. But next to my 66 Pro Reverb blackface, it sounded great. So really, I think we're just going to go ahead and just go from this side over and just start looking through everything and figuring out what exactly needs to be done. So let's shift the chassis over a little bit so you guys can see it. We'll zoom in. All right, so the first thing I want to start with is double checking voltages in this amp. So the way to do that is just put your multimeter over to DC volts. We'll put that off to the side. Should be able to see that. And then I like to put the the black wire here in the little holes in the chassis so it stays. And then the red lead, you can put it in a number of places, but I like to go right here. And these two wires are coming off the output transformer, and that's where you will see voltage if there is any. And then make sure that the standby switch is off. We see no voltage. So the amp is safe. So we'll just confirm, show you it's safe. So we're good to go there. Put the multimeter off to the side here. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and look at is the 3-prong swap here. So obviously this amp will come with a 2-prong cable. I'm going to go ahead and tilt it a little bit so you can see a bit more. So we have the earth connection, the ground, and it is soldered to a, looks like a, why am I blanking on the name of these? But yeah, just a little tag that goes off of the bolt here. That's pretty typical. You can see right here, this is a factory joint. And in this era, kind of the end of the black face into the silver face, that was commonplace on how they did the grounds. It looked like somebody added some solder here to really make sure it's a really solid connection and did the same there. That looks, as far as I can tell, totally fine. Not ideal. You would, typically rather go directly to chassis, but this is era correct, quote unquote. Now let's kind of see what we got going on here with the power and the neutral. So let's get these wires up so we can see what we're looking at here. So we kind of trace what the previous tech did. There we go. Okay, so what do we got here? We've got the white neutral, which should be connected to one of these two black leads off of the power transformer. And you can see that it is going here and here. So that is not done correctly, but we will follow this lead here. So this is neutral. This yellow is the neutral continued. Here's the neutral continued. It looks like the ground switch are just using as a convenient way to join wires, which is fine. And we have the neutral going to the tip of the fuse. So immediately that is wrong. Again, this should be connected directly to the wire here off of the transformer. So that will absolutely need to be changed. And then we have the hot lead, this black wire that is going here again to this other end of the ground switch, which is not connected to anything, but just being used as kind of a terminal strip, essentially. So that's going to this lug. And then from there, it's going over here to the switch, which is then going, which is where the other end of the power transformer is connected. So that's wrong. We will be updating that. Now, if you want to see a video dedicated to just showing you how to do a 3-prong swap on a vintage Fender like this, I will put that up in the corner of your screen, as well as put in the description. I did this swap on my personal 66, 67 Blackface Pro Reverb and showed you exactly how to do it step by step. And so I'm not going to go into full detail in this video, but it's just pointing out that that is wrong. So that will definitely need to be changed. That's not a huge deal. Looking over at the bias circuit here, we see it's got the original diode, original carbon comp it looks like, but then a swapped capacitor. This looks fine as far as I can tell. It's always hard when you're getting somebody else's work because you don't know when they worked on it. But this guy, whoever LRS is, apparently did the work in 09. So it's it's been a little bit since then, quite a long time actually. So probably I'll talk to the owner, see what he wants to do, but we will probably be swapping at least this out, and these are probably fine, but we'll check the doghouse and see what's in there. These are low voltage. There's only 25 volts or so going through these little caps here. So we'll put that on the list. I believe I have an F&T ready to go for that. We'll have to check the bias to see how that goes and see this resistor. It looks like it's original, so we'll see if it'll bias correctly with that in there. All right, let's continue looking down the amp. We've got these resistors here on the tube sockets. So these were swapped, this one and this one. I'll have to measure what those are, and then it looks like these were swapped as well. These should be 1500, I believe. And then these should be 470, if I remember correctly. I'll pull up the schematic here in a second. So we'll check to confirm that those are all correct, but those were swapped, which is not a bad thing. That's pretty typical. Moving on down the line, we've got the blue molded still, which is great. That's what you want to see. Looks like a resistor here was swapped, potentially. Or maybe both, hard to tell, but it's definitely some resistor swapped. You can see the different colors on here, so hard to tell what is original and what's not, but definitely some swaps here. So we'll have to measure all these, make sure they measure okay. It's got some goop on it here. Looks like he tried to stop some vibration or something, the previous guy. He's got some red pen on some of these leads here. I'm not sure why you would do that. Maybe just for him to check where he checked voltage is at. I'm not really sure. I'll have to confirm everything's looking good there when we run some voltage through the amp. We've got this swapped right here in the tremolo circuit, pretty typical. In fact, in the Pro Reverb, my Pro Reverb, I had to do the exact same thing and swap this cap out. So that's pretty typical. The Roach looks original. Moving down the line. So we got another cap swap here. You can see the caps there. Tried to cram all of the leads in there. Typically what you want to do if you're doing these two small caps together, the original amp would have had a single cap here that was two of these in one, and it would have had one single ground lead going out here, and this wire right here was actually part of that ground lead. So typically what you want to do, so you don't have to try and cram 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different leads in this eyelet, is to just twist them together and then cut one so that you have only one going together, and you'll solder those together. But as long as it goes through and it's a good connection, totally fine. Other swaps right here. That's original, that's original. This silver mica I put in the amp. And then you got the blue moldeds, which all look good. So yeah, everything looks pretty good. This definitely looks fairly clean. All of this looks great on the tube sockets. Cool. Looking at the codes here, 6.8. So 0568. So the 5th week of 68. It looks like it was stamped here and here. I believe that matches up with the rest of the parts in the amp, so very early 68. So if we flip it over and look at, well, this right here actually is a 48th week of 67, this pot, so you can see it's 67, 68. The black line silver face amps are typically 67 into early 68 when you see that. So that all looks pretty good to me, so we're going to go ahead and flip it over. Very carefully. It's quite heavy. Zoom that out. So this was swapped by me, so we know that already. This transformer is a 67, and this transformer is a 67, so pretty typical. This is the correct vintage part, just a 66. And then this is also a 67 transformer, so pretty typical there. Go ahead and take this off to see what's under here. All right. So I learned my lesson in the past. I always want to double check these caps here, make sure there's no voltage. So no voltage. You'll notice this one is reversed. No voltage. Okay, we're safe. So this last one is reversed. I remember that was kind of a quirk of the Pro Reverb schematic, how they did it. So again, these resistors were swapped. All of these were swapped, and these carbon comps look like they might be original. Lots and lots of goop. I don't know if you can see that. Tons and tons of silicon everywhere, which is not great. And then once again, caps were placed in 2009 by Mr. looks like LRS, or I think it's LRS. So yeah, and then again, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of drawing on vintage amps, but I guess maybe in 09 that was a more common thing. So now we want to go ahead and just run through all the resistors and pull up the schematic and just make sure everything is as it should be. Okay, so I've got the schematic here up in front of me, and we're going to go ahead and check all of this here. So first and foremost, it looks like these two are 70 microfarad 350 volt caps, which is exactly what it calls for here. And then it's got two resistors. You'll see these are 1 watt 220Ks, which those are. They look original, so we're going to go ahead and check what they read. I'm not sure if these will read in circuit or not, but we'll test it and find out. These ones are throwing a fit for some reason, my multimeter, so we're just going to move on for right now on those. We'll circle back to that. We'll go to this one. Now this, let me make a note here. This should be, so we've got a 4700 1 watt and then a 1K 1 watt. This one's reading 10K. This should be a 4700 4.7K, and that's another 10K. Oops. Okay, so those will need to be swapped. And then we'll have to lift the leads on one of those to see what they actually measure. Actually, we can do that real quick because I have the soldering iron already hot. There we go. Okay, 250K, which is not too bad. And let's measure the other one. 270. Okay, so I think both of those are worth replacing. Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and look at these caps. So these should be 20 microfarad, 525 volts, 3 of them, which would be these 3. And these are 22 microfarad, 500 volt, which is totally fine. But again, these were recapped in 09, so it's been, 14 years. So probably worth replacing those if the owner wants me to. But yeah, this is overall probably going to be completely redone because these need to be redone, these need to be redone, and hopefully the owner wants to buy some new caps so we can swap that over. All right, let's go ahead and flip it back over to the front and run through it with the schematic. All right, I'm not sure where the camera cut off there. Sorry about that. But in quick recap, so these 220K 5%ers are both off too much, so we'll be replacing both of those. And then the 100K is fine, and the 82K is not. This 820 ohm was way off, is measuring about 100 ohm, so that definitely needs to be replaced. This 100 ohm is fine. This 22K is fine. Now we're measuring the 220Ks. There's a pair of them right here, and these do not need to be as close as these two here. These are silver bands, so 10% tolerance. So this is, pretty close. I think it's fine, 250. So that's not too bad. Of course, I can change every single resistor in this amp if the owner wants me to, but that's up to them. 236, that one's much closer. So that's fine. Okay, so now to recap, we'll go through what I have on my phone here. So we've got this bias cap that we're likely going to be replacing with a new, probably the FNT 100 that I have. We've got these resistors here on the tube sockets. Those are off. So the 470 ohm, they installed 1.5Ks, so that's way off. So those will be replaced. We'll likely have to replace the bias pot resistor to bias it correctly. TBD on that. 3 of the 4 here where the phase inverter is will need to be replaced. We got an 820 ohm over there, need to be replaced. We've got to double check these right here, pull them out of circuit to confirm their values, but I think they're probably going to be fine. This 2200 is borderline. Was a little high. And then this 100K is also a bit high. So overall, not too bad on that front. And then all of the capacitors, like I said, were already changed. And they were changed, obviously, 14 years ago, but there's not a lot of voltage going through these. These are, only 25 volt caps on the schematic, 25, 25, so you can see right there. So with that in mind, I just worked on my spring reverb tank, which is from 1964, and its original 25 microfarad, 25 volt caps still seemed perfectly fine. It had no bubbling or anything, and those are from 64. So I think these are all fine. So I'm not going to touch those. We will hopefully be replacing the caps in the doghouse, and then just a couple resistor swaps, and finally, of course, the 3-prong, which was done terribly. So that's our order of tasks for this amp today. So let's go ahead and get geared up, and I think we'll start with the 3-prong. Okay, so we've got the amp situated here to be able to tackle the 3-prong. So basically the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove one of these leads, these black leads, off of the power transformer, and that is going to be connecting to the neutral, the white wire here on the receptacle. So we'll start by removing this yellow and cleaning up that area so we have space for it. So go ahead and grab our soldering iron, tin it a little bit. Wow, okay, so it looks like the previous guy wrapped the wires around each other, which makes this quite a lot more difficult. Interesting, okay. Well, I think the easiest thing to do is actually going to be just cutting this lead down a little bit, so we'll do that. Because it only has to go here to the receptacle, so we can just cut it there. Do the same there. Get that out of the way. Now we just need to undo one of these leads off the power transformer. We will do this one here. Perfect. Okay, so those two are both sandwiched in that little eyelet. Go ahead and add some solder. So next up, we will work on the hot. So the hot will be going from this receptacle. Get these out of the way. It'll be going to the fuse tip. So let's take the fuse out. Make sure this is the right fuse in the first place. 2 amp. That is correct, 2 amp Slobo. So we'll want to remove this lead off of the fuse tip. We'll want to undo this as well. Honestly, we'll just undo most of this stuff here. So we need this to reach the fuse tip. This is not long enough, so we can use another one that's longer. Now these two might be wrapped around each other as well, just like the other one was. Nope. Okay, so that's not as bad. I think we're just going to redo this completely because I don't trust the work. All right, so we got the hot there. Now we're going to connect the hot to the fuse tip. Nice little hook on there, and then we can run this up and over right here to the fuse tip. Now let's clean out the fuse tip. These can be a bit tricky to solder too because they're so thick. I like to make sure that both sides are covered, which it is. Then we can go ahead and just snip off this little excess. Beautiful, there we go. So that fuse is connected to the hot, which is correct. And now we'll go from this part of the fuse over to the switch, which is where the output transformer is also connected. So we'll take another one of these little leads here and run it from there to there. You have a nice little bend on these, not a crazy hook, but enough to have a little bit of a mechanical connection. Now we just have these two leads which are doing nothing, so I'm just going to connect them up around to the ground switch here, just so they're up and out of the way. Perfect. All right, I think that does it for this video. We're going to stop here. We got the 3-prong good to go, and the rest of the stuff is really just dependent on the owner. My bandmate who played the amp and really loved it, so he wanted to buy it. So I just want to see what he wants to do with it. As far as all of the caps in the doghouse, definitely I think we should swap those. There's some resistors here in the phase inverter area that definitely need to be swapped. A couple here that need to be swapped as well. The bias cap should be swapped. And then everything else I think is just kind of a personal preference thing, or just not super urgent, like all of these little caps here, all of these little guys. I think they're fine because they have such little voltage going through them. I'm not really concerned about those. And oh yeah, and also these caps here, or resistors, excuse me. Those should be 470 ohm, and there were, I think, 1.5K, so not even close. And then obviously we had resistors in the doghouse as well. So overall, probably, I don't know, $30, $40 in parts to get all of those things rectified, and then we can start it up and see what's what. So anyways, we're going to end here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is just kind of me filming myself doing work I would be doing whether I filmed it or not. So yeah, obviously very niche content. If you're not from the amp world, then this is probably, well, let's be honest, you didn't make it this far in the video. But if you did, go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you have any suggestions or recommendations for future videos like this. Otherwise, I'll just keep filming me doing stuff on the workbench here and taking you guys along for the ride with me. So until next time, I will see you guys.